For over a month now, we've dedicated a portion of our 10 o'clock news to giving the community a voice.
A voice for the people to express their concerns and feelings in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. It's part of our We Stand Together series. Tonight, we're one-on-one with the top brass of IMPD, Police Chief Randal Taylor.
For more than 30 years, IMPD Chief Randal Taylor has been on the front lines.
Well, it means a lot, right?
First as an officer in Champaign, Illinois, and eventually working his way up to the top job here with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. Taylor was promoted back in December. 2 months later, COVID-19 hit. A month after that, Officer Breanne Leath was killed, and then the killing of George Floyd happened. And protests followed. In less than a year in the top spot, he has seen it all.
So you come from an interesting background, right? You're a black guy, and you've been on the job policing for 30 plus years, specifically as a police chief. How difficult is that? And also speak to how have you seen racial tension heightened over the past few years specifically?
Sure. So even when I grew up, as a young black man, I experienced things. I knew the eyes were watching me for different things when I maybe go into a store and a white male counterpart wouldn't experience that. So I've experienced some of it, not to the extremes of some people that I've heard of, but I know what it's like to be looked at simply because of the color of your skin. In this role as chief, I would hope people understand that even though I might not have experienced the extremes of some other people, I do get it and I understand it. Yeah. And I don't like it, I don't want to see it, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure we get on top of that. But I also want people to understand that over those years, I have seen plenty of white officers that have done fantastic jobs, and they're not taking into account your race. I won't say we're perfect, no department is. So we have to watch and we have to do the things that it takes to limit those times. But I know they exist, and I never argue with people's perceptions of what happened. Whether it actually happened or not, it's not the point. If they perceive that they've been treated unfairly, then we want to deal with that. And we'll do what it takes to make those things happen. But I've seen it. I've seen it in my personal life. Like I said, I've heard all those stories. There's no room for that in law enforcement. I think the good side of that is there's a lot more good officers out there than there are bad officers. And that's the truth. That really is the truth. And that's coming through Champaign and being on the Sheriff's Department and being on IMPD. We have really great men and women. Like I said, we're not perfect. I'm not telling people that we haven't made those kind of mistakes. But let us know about it so we can do something about it.
When you saw the protests, and you were obviously out there, how did that make you feel? And now that we're a couple weeks away, what's your takeaway?
Well, I participated in some of them too. So, that whole incident with George Floyd, I haven't come across anybody in law enforcement that thought that was right. Of course, myself included. The protests that we had were kind of combined with some local police action shootings, and even though I don't agree with that, and I think there's some misinformation out there on what exactly happened with those shootings, if you're going to protest and do it peacefully, I'm not standing in the way of that at all. That's why I was out there on some of them and walked with some people. My concern, obviously, is when things weren't peaceful, when things happen, vandalisms and things being thrown at officers. Well, I'm not going to get behind that. I think you have the right to protest and right to be heard, and I get that. But if you're going to start throwing things at my officers or tearing up downtown, well, then we have to take some kind of action to stop that. And I think that's what we've done, but we're still reviewing those things. I know there's a lot of people, well, not necessarily a lot, but there's a few people at least that were affected by tear gas and didn't like that, and I've spoken to some of them, and fortunately tear gas is one of those things it's not static, it's not stationary. We can't use it on a group that's causing trouble and not know that it might not drift into places where people maybe weren't causing trouble. There's groups that are looking at that, and whenever they get done with that report, if there's a different alternative, then I'll certainly look at it. but I think people also have to understand that we can't just let things get tore up. You know, businesses downtown have the right to do business, and they shouldn't have to worry about windows being broke out and those kind of things, and we certainly shouldn't just stand by and let that happen. So I think people have to understand that we'll do our best to give warnings before that kind of stuff is dispersed, but when you hear that warning, help yourself and just start moving out of the area. When things calm down, you may be able to come back and continue a peaceful protest, and I think that's fine.
Anything that you want to add in that maybe I'm not asking?
Well, I guess I would hope that as things progress, whether it's dealing with the protest or dealing with our recent officer-involved shootings, I would say, like I said in the beginning, I know it's hard, but be patient. Wait till you have all the information before you make up your mind on what you think happened. Like I said, there's a lot of misinformation that gets out on things, and people get in their mind, I think sometimes, well, that must have been what happened, because that's what I heard. Don't be so sure of that. I think a lot of times people think that we have something to hide. We have nothing to hide. If we've made a mistake, then we'll deal with that. And I just hope that people would give us that chance to share our story, our side of things as well. Sometimes we're bound by legal issues and lawsuits and those kind of things that don't really allow us to talk about that. But I think when everything is said and done, I think people will understand why we acted the way we did. And like I said, nobody likes any of our citizens to be killed, regardless of the circumstance. But we've got a good group of officers out there. I think a lot of times they're unfairly treated. People have their own idea of what law enforcement is like, which a lot of times I don't think is really necessarily close to the truth. So understand that we've got good officers out there. Yes, we make mistakes, but we're also committed to limiting those mistakes and taking care of that.
And tomorrow night, part 2 of our conversation with Chief Taylor. We spent some time at a place in the city that's close to his heart. Now remember, you can also listen to our We Stand Together podcast anytime. Find tonight's episode and others online at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.